Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf had been best friends with Skylar Neese for years. All three grew up in Star City, West Virginia. Skylar, born February 10, 1996, was a top student at University High School and dreamed of becoming a defense attorney. Sheila, born September 28, 1995, had known Skylar since childhood, quiet, observant, always close. Rachel, born June 10, 1996, joined the group later. But as Rachel and Sheila grew closer than Skylar expected, something shifted. Skylar's parents, Dave and Mary Neese, worked long hours and poured everything into raising their daughter. She was bright, driven, and deeply loved. By contrast, little is known about Sheila's and Rachel's home lives. They blended in easily, normal on the outside, just like everyone else. On the night of July 5th to 6th, 2012, Sheila and Rachel used a plan to lure Skylar into a quiet wooded area near Brave, Pennsylvania. They told her they wanted to smoke pot. In their car trunk, they had placed 2 sharp tools wrapped in towels. They also brought bleach, wet wipes, and extra clothes. Once in the woods, they counted to 3. Then they struck Skylar more than 50 times with those tools. Skylar was left dying. They covered her body with branches and leaves. During this, she asked, "Why?"
Later, both teens said they did it because they did not like Skylar anymore. They said they did not want to be her friend. At a 2023 parole hearing, Rachel spoke of deeper reasons. She said she felt jealous of Skylar. She feared Skylar would reveal her relationship with Sheila. She also admitted she felt anger towards Skylar. At first, Skylar's disappearance was treated as a runaway case. No alert was issued. Skylar's parents printed missing person flyers. Police found surveillance footage showing Sheila's car near the area. Investigators identified the vehicle. 6 months later, in January 2013, Rachel broke down at a psychiatric center and confessed. She led authorities to the site. Skylar's remains were found on January 16, 2013, in Greene County, Pennsylvania. On May 1, 2013, Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree charges. At her hearing, she read an apology statement. "I am so sorry. I don't know if there is a right way to say sorry. That was not the real me." The judge gave her a 30-year sentence. She can request release after 10 years. Sheila was charged as an adult with the most serious counts, taking someone against their will and plotting. She first pleaded not guilty. On January 24, 2014, she accepted a deal and pleaded guilty to the top count. She received a life term with a chance to ask for release after 15 years. Rachel's first chance for release was in 2023 but was denied. Her next hearing will be in 2026. If granted, she could leave in April 2028. Sheila will be eligible to ask for release in 2028. At her 2023 hearing, Rachel spoke through tears and said she was deeply sorry. Sheila has never made a public apology. Now, how do 2 teenage girls commit an act beyond comprehension and keep it secret for years? Michelle "Missy" Avila was born on February 8, 1968, in Los Angeles. She grew up in the San Fernando Valley. She went to San Fernando High School. Since they were 8, Michelle and Karen Severson had been best friends. They did everything together. In their teens, Laura Doyle joined their group. The 3 girls became very close. Over time, Severson began to feel left out. Michelle was popular. She was very confident. Boys liked her. Severson felt jealous. She thought Michelle was flirting with her boyfriend, Randy Fernandez. Severson whispered mean rumors about Michelle. She called her a tramp and even slapped her in public. Doyle grew upset too when Michelle seemed to come between her and her own boyfriend. By October 1985, jealousy had turned into something far more serious. One day, Michelle told her mother she was meeting Laura. Instead, Doyle drove her into Angeles National Forest. Severson and another girl, Eva Chirumbolo, came along. They stopped in a quiet spot beside a shallow stream. Severson and Doyle shouted at Michelle. They accused her of sleeping with their boyfriends. Doyle grabbed Michelle's hair and cut off some strands. They tied her hands and covered her mouth. Then they held her head underwater. The creek was only 6 inches deep, but they pressed her down until she stopped struggling. To keep her from rising, they laid a heavy log on her back. Eva ran away in fear. Severson and Doyle left Michelle under the log. Doyle later made up a story. She said they met boys in a blue Camaro and came back to find Michelle gone. Michelle was reported missing. 3 days later, on October 4th, 1985, hikers found her body. She was face down under the log. Her hands were still tied. Her hair was cut. It was clear someone had held her underwater until she could not breathe. Severson and Doyle kept acting as if they were innocent. Severson even moved in with Michelle's grieving mother. She comforted her, visited the grave, sent flowers, and spoke about other people who might be responsible. Doyle sent a sympathy card and a small check. Their act lasted nearly 3 years. In July 1988, Eva felt too guilty to stay silent. She told detectives exactly what had happened. Her story led to the arrest of Severson and Doyle. At their trial in Pasadena, both pleaded not guilty to first-degree charges. Prosecutors said jealousy over Michelle's popularity and boys had driven them to harm her. Both teens were tried as adults. Severson was 17 at the time. In January 1990, the jury found them guilty of second-degree charges. That means the act was intentional but not planned long in advance. On March 9, 1990, Judge Jack B. TSO gave each girl the maximum term, 15 years to life, with credit for time already spent in custody. They became eligible for parole after about 7 years. During the trial, people heard how the two had lied for years. They had attended funerals and pretended to be heartbroken. They stayed close to Michelle's family and delayed the search for truth. Severson stayed in prison until December 9, 2011. About 21 and a half years. Doyle went free about a year later in December 2012. After her release, Severson wrote a memoir about what she called a tragic act driven by jealousy. Her plan to make a movie from the book angered Michelle's family. They filed a lawsuit in 2015, saying Severson had caused them more pain and should not profit from her story. Their case led California lawmakers to pass a rule often called Missy's Law. It stops people who harm others from making money off telling their own story without the victim's family agreeing. The next case started with fast food and a few sharp words. It ended in something far worse. Sarah Ann Kolb was born in 1988 and raised in Milan, Illinois, by her mother and stepfather. From a young age, school was a struggle. She bounced between campuses and clashed often with teachers. By her early teens, she had embraced the Jugalo subculture, drawn to its defiance and darkness. In 2003, at age 15, she enrolled at the Black Hawk Outreach Center, a last-chance school for students who couldn't make it in the mainstream. Corey Charles Gregory was born on November 2, 1987. He lived with his mother in Moline, Illinois. At first, people described him as sweet and artistic. Over time, drinking, other substances, and his friendship with Sarah changed him. He became more volatile and unpredictable. Sarah and Corey spent almost all their time together. As Sarah's influence over him grew, his behavior grew more extreme. By late 2004, Sarah led a group of outcasts and juggalos at the Outreach Center. When 14-year-old Adrienne Reynolds arrived in November 2004, she stood out. Adrienne was outgoing and confident. That drew Sarah's envy. Sarah felt her position in the group was threatened. On January 21, 2005, Sarah invited Adrienne to meet her, Corey, and another teen at a Taco Bell parking lot. From the start, the mood was tense. Words turned into slaps. Sarah grabbed a wooden hatchet handle and struck Adrienne again and again. Meanwhile, Corey wrapped his belt around Adrienne's neck and tightened it. Adrienne soon lay still. She did not survive. Sarah and Corey left the scene as if nothing had happened. A witness calmly walked into the restaurant and later told the police what she saw. Afterwards, Sarah led Corey to Adrienne's grandparents' farm in Aledo. They tried to burn her body with gasoline. When the fire did not fully take, they called in another teen, Nathan Godet. He used a handsaw to cut Adrienne's body into pieces. Sarah and Corey put the burnt fragments and body parts into garbage bags. They dumped those bags at Black Hawk State Historic Site. Adrienne's parents, Tony and Joanne Reynolds, grew worried when she missed her shift at Checkers. They alerted the police. Sarah and Corey gave the same cover story at first. They said Adrienne had asked to be dropped off at McDonald's, but Corey made a slip. He mentioned their argument. The police found Adrienne's charred remains at the farm. That led to Sarah's arrest on January 27, 2005. Sarah went on trial first. Her trial began on October 31, 2005 in Rock Island County. Prosecutors showed diary entries where Sarah wrote that she planned to end Adrienne's life. They called about 50 witnesses, including Nathan, who described how they cut up the body. The defense said Corey was the main instigator and that Sarah had only watched out of fear. After 15 hours of jury discussion, the vote was 11 for conviction and 1 for not guilty. That split resulted in a mistrial. Sarah's second trial began on February 6, 2006, in Dixon, Illinois. She chose not to testify. 16 days later, the jury found her guilty of 2 counts of first-degree wrongdoing and 1 count of hiding evidence. The judge gave her a 48-year term for the offense and a 5-year term for the Coverup to run at the same time. Her total sentence was 53 years. Corey pleaded guilty to the same charges. On July 10, 2006, he received a 40-year term for the fatal acts and a 5-year term for hiding evidence. His total time to serve was 45 years. Sarah's motive was jealousy. She felt Adrienne threatened her place in the group and her hold over Corey. Sarah wrote in her journal that she would end Adrienne's life the day before the incident. Corey's motive is less clear. He later said he felt pressured by Sarah, but his actions showed he joined in willingly. He confessed the day Sarah was arrested. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life terms for offenders under 18 must be revisited. Both Sarah and Corey sought shorter terms. In March of 2022, Corey's request was heard by Judge Church. The judge said the law left no choice but to keep the original 45-year term. Sarah asked for the same relief but was denied. She remains held at Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln, Illinois. Corey serves out his term at Pontiac Correctional Center. The next act was supposed to scare him, not end like this. Regina and Margaret DeFrancisco grew up in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood. They lived with their mother, Nora. Regina was 17. She had an outgoing nature. Margaret was 16. She looked up to her sister in everything. Money was always tight at home. The sisters spent time with local gang members. They tried out risky behavior. Regina once got in trouble after police found 2 kilos of white powder linked to a gang associate. That incident put both sisters under scrutiny. Then Oscar Velasquez arrived. He was 22 and worked as a truck driver from Dallas. In April 2000, he gave Regina a ride home. They started seeing each other. Their brief romance lasted 3 weeks. Oscar did not know about the dangerous path the sisters were on. On June 6, 2000, Regina called Oscar over. He came to their house. Their friend Veronica Garcia, 15, was there too. Veronica said she handed Margaret a .38 caliber pistol. She thought they would scare Oscar into giving up money. Oscar went down to the basement. He thought it would be a private talk. Instead, there was a single gunshot. Margaret stood behind him. She fired the pistol. Oscar did not survive. The sisters then searched his pockets. They took around $600 and a silver necklace. They wrapped Oscar's body in a tarp and some bedding. Then they carried it outside. They put it into Oscar's white Camaro Z28. Next, they poured nail polish remover over him and set him on fire. After that, they drove the car to another spot and set it ablaze too. They hoped the flames would hide their actions. A witness saw the fire and called 911 twice. Firefighters and police arrived. Investigators found bits of bedding with patterns matching the DeFrancisco home. Tests revealed cleaned-up DNA traces in the basement. They also found a bullet casing like the one used in the shooting. The sisters ran away instead of facing questions. Margaret stayed in Illinois. Regina fled to Texas. They stayed hidden for almost 2 years. TV shows featured their faces. Viewers sent in tips. On March the 24th, 2002, police caught Margaret in Rockford, Illinois. A tip led them to her. Regina was found later in Dallas. A traffic stop turned into a high-speed chase. That's when officers realized who she was. Their trial began in July 2004. Both sisters claimed they acted in self-defense. They said Oscar had been aggressive. Veronica Garcia spoke in court. She admitted giving Margaret the pistol. She said she never thought Oscar would be shot. Other witnesses described what the sisters said afterward. One said Margaret kicked him in the head so he could pass away faster. Jessica Benitez, Luciana Macias, and Maria Constantino backed up Veronica's words. The court looked at why they did it. Oscar had lent Regina $1,000 for bail. When he asked for the money back, the sisters saw a chance to get more. They lured him under false pretenses. Regina's jury talked for about 6.5 hours. They found her guilty of first-degree charges and taking money by force. Margaret's first jury could not agree. One juror refused to believe someone so young could do something so aggressive. They held a new trial for Margaret in November 2004. That jury found her guilty too. On September 9th, 2004, Regina was sentenced to 35 years in prison. On December 14, 2004, Margaret got 46 years. Both served their time at Illinois' Logan Correctional Center. They appealed their sentences. Every appeal was denied. Veronica Garcia pleaded guilty to hiding what happened. She spent about 5 years in prison and has since been released. The next story started on Christmas Eve. By the 26th, 8 people were gone. In Dayton, Ohio, a group of 4 teens called themselves the Downtown Posse. Marvelous Keene was the oldest and the one they followed. His girlfriend was Laura Taylor. Heather Matthews had just come home from a correctional program and she was involved with DeMarcus Smith. All 4 dropped out of school. They spent their days in downtown Dayton looking for money. illegal substances, or trouble. Marvelous Keene, born July 5, 1973, had a history of small-time theft. Laura Taylor, born January 31, 1976, was known for her tough attitude and could rally the others into risky schemes. Heather Matthews, born February 27, 1972, and DeMarcus Smith, born July 3, 1975, lived on the edge with the group. From December 24 to 26, 1992, they carried out a string of armed thefts and shootings that shook the city. On Christmas Eve, Taylor lured 34-year-old Joseph Wilkerson to her apartment with a promise of a party. Once inside, Keene and Matthews tied him up and searched for valuables. Keene fired a small pistol into Wilkerson's chest. Taylor then shot him in the head. He did not survive. Later that night, Keene and Smith spotted 18-year-old Danita Gillette by a payphone. They forced her to take off her shoes and then opened fire. She did not survive. They took her shoes and moved on. Still on Christmas Eve, they went back to Wilkerson's home. Then they tracked down Jeffrey Wright, who had once dated Matthews. Smith fired 4 shots into Wright's legs. Wright survived. On Christmas Day, Taylor drove while the others waited in a car. They stopped next to 19-year-old Richmond Maddox. Someone in the group opened fire. Maddox did not survive. The spree continued on December 26th. Keene and Smith walked into a small market. They demanded money from clerk Sarah Abraham. Both shots hit her head. She did not survive. A customer was hurt, but lived through it. That same day, 2 teens who hesitated, 16-year-old Wendy Cottrell and 18-year-old Marvin Washington, were taken to a gravel pit. There, the group ended their lives. On December 27th, police found the group's stolen car. They arrested Keene, Taylor, Matthews, and Smith without incident. Taylor even told Keene to open fire on an officer, but he refused. At trial, the teens gave various reasons. For Wilkerson and Gillette, it was about taking valuables. For the others, it was about power and fear of being identified. Keene argued the harshest sentence was biased, but nothing changed. Taylor, Matthews, and Smith each received very long prison terms. Taylor's sentence is at least 145 years before she can ask for release. Matthews and Smith received similar terms. Keene was given capital punishment. His life was ended by the state on July 21, 2009. He was the 1,000th person to face that form of punishment since 1982. His last meal? He requested a porterhouse steak with A1 sauce, a pound of jumbo fried shrimp with cocktail sauce, French fries, onion rings, Pillsbury dinner rolls with butter, 2 plums, a mango, a pound of seedless white grapes, German chocolate cake, and 2 bottles each of Pepsi and A&W cream soda. When asked for final words, he simply replied, "No, I have no words." Taylor, Matthews, and Smith remained behind bars. Taylor had a hearing in December 2021 but was denied any chance at release. Up next is an act by 2 12-year-olds who claim they did it for a figure that doesn't exist. But before we move on to the next case, feel free to subscribe for more stories like this. Anissa E. Wire was born on November 10, 2001 in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Her parents are Bill and Christy Wire. She grew up in that town. There, she met Morgan Geyser in elementary school. They became close friends. Morgan E. Geyser was born on May 16, 2002, also in Waukesha. Her parents are Matt and Angie Geyser. Until 4th grade, she seemed like any other bright kid. Then she began to show worrying signs of mental struggle. She talked often about a frightening figure from the internet called Slender Man. She even carried a toy sledgehammer at times. At home, Morgan's behavior grew harder to manage. She heard voices and saw things that others could not. She spoke to ghosts, imaginary pets named Maggie and Sev, and even to Lord Voldemort. She said a dark shape she called It lurked in mirrors and corners. Her mother described moments when Morgan behaved like a cat and raised ants as if they were pets. Both girls met another friend, Peyton Leutner, in 4th grade. Peyton was also 12 years old. The 3 spent time together at school. Morgan's strange beliefs began to worry classmates. Anissa, hoping to fit in, joined in Morgan's make-believe world. On the night of May 30th, 2014, Anissa and Morgan had a sleepover at Morgan's house. The next morning, they asked Peyton to play hide-and-seek in David's Park. Morgan carried a small, sharp tool. Anissa brought a backpack with supplies. They led Peyton into the woods. There, they held her down. Morgan used the sharp tool 19 times. The sharp blade cut Peyton's arms, legs, and torso. 2 cuts nearly reached her main vessels. 1 cut went through her diaphragm, liver, and stomach. Peyton managed to crawl away. She reached a nearby bike path. A person riding by called for help. Paramedics arrived quickly. Surgeons worked on Peyton for 6 hours. They said if the blade had gone just 1 millimeter farther, she would not have survived. Peyton went home a week later. She still felt fear and had trouble sleeping. She kept a pair of broken scissors under her pillow. About 5 hours after the accident, police found Anissa and Morgan walking near a highway 5 miles away. They had the weapon with them. The two said they were going to find Slender Man in a forest far away. During questioning, Morgan seemed calm and distant. Anissa cried and said she felt sorry. She also said they had to do it. They believed Slender Man would reward them for protecting their families. By fall 2014, doctors diagnosed Morgan with early-onset schizophrenia. She had long bouts of hearing and seeing things. At first, her treatment was inconsistent. Her condition worsened. In late 2015, she began regular medicine and started to see reality more clearly. Both girls faced adult charges. Morgan faced the most serious charge of trying to end a life. Anissa was charged with a lesser count of causing serious harm. The court decided they acted with full intent. Their belief that they must fight or be harmed did not move the case to juvenile court. In August 2017, Anissa pleaded guilty to aiding in serious harm. Her lawyers said she shared Morgan's false beliefs. A jury later found her not responsible by reason of mental disorder. Experts testified that Anissa truly believed the harmful act was needed to serve Slender Man and keep her family safe. Morgan agreed to a deal in October 2017. She admitted guilt but was found mentally ill. She avoided a full trial. She told the judge she had driven the weapon 19 times. She said she was sorry and never meant for so much harm to happen. Judge Michael Boren set their sentences in late 2017 and early 2018. On December 21, 2017, Anissa was sent to a mental health institution for up to 25 years. She had to stay at least 3 years in treatment before any release. She would then have community supervision until she turned 37. At sentencing, Anissa spoke to the court. She said she deeply regretted her actions. She promised to work hard to prevent anything like this happening again. On February 1, 2018, Morgan received a maximum term of 40 years with treatment. The judge said she still posed a risk, despite being only 12 at the time. Morgan apologized again and said she never intended the terrible result. Anissa left inpatient care on September 13, 2021, after more than 4 years of treatment. She wore a GPS monitor and lived under strict supervision until age 37. In September 2023, the GPS requirement was lifted. She was living with her father and continued therapy. There have been no reports of any problems since. Morgan remains at the Winnebago Mental Health Institute. In early 2024, she asked to leave under conditions but was denied. In January 2025, a judge approved her move to a supervised group home later that year. She will remain under care until 2058, when her term ends. The next teen lured her friend into the woods for $9 million promised by a stranger online. Denali Bremer grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. She was 18 in June 2019 when she met someone online who called himself Tyler. He later turned out to be Darren Schillmiller from Indiana, a 21-year-old who lived in a basement and posed as a millionaire. He offered her $9 million to force someone into an intimate act and then take their life. He asked her to send pictures and videos as proof. Around that same time, Bremer's friend group included several local teens, including Caden McIntosh. Caden was 16. She agreed to join Bremer's plan. Cynthia Hoffman was 19 and had a developmental disability. Cynthia believed they were going on a friendly hike near Thunderbird Falls. On June 2, 2019, the three set out together. Bremer and Caden left the trail. They said they wanted to relax. Then they bound Cynthia's hands, feet, and mouth with duct tape. They said they were following instructions from the online contact. When Cynthia panicked and said she would call for help, Caden took a 9mm handgun from Bremer's bag. Caden shot Cynthia in the back of the head. Bremer recorded what happened. She sent the footage to Schillmiller. Afterward, they left Cynthia's body in the Eklutna River. They drove to another park. There, they burned her belongings, including the handgun. Bremer then falsely called Cynthia's family and claimed she had dropped her off at a nearby park. Bremer had also recruited other teens to help plan and carry out the act, including Caleb Leyland, who later pleaded guilty to second-degree charges. In court, Bremer said she agreed because she was angry with Cynthia. She mentioned a fight over a boy named Zach. Still, court documents show she planned the act carefully. In February 2023, Bremer pleaded guilty to a first-degree charge of taking a life. Other charges, like plotting, tampering with evidence, and a second-degree charge were dropped in her plea deal. In May 2024, Caden pleaded guilty to a second-degree charge of taking a life. Other charges were dropped. She faced a sentence of 30 to 85 years. Her final hearing was set for November 14, 2024, with a check-in scheduled for June 2025. Schillmiller, the online instigator, admitted he encouraged the act and shared illegal images involving a minor. He also admitted planning payment for the act. He received a 99-year sentence. On February 12, 2024, Judge Andrew Peterson sentenced Bremer to 99 years in prison, the maximum allowed for a first-degree charge of taking a life. The judge called the act cold and planned. He said her age did not lessen her responsibility. As of June 2025, Caden is still waiting for her final hearing. Her defense has experts ready to speak about her age and mental state at the time. Next, a supposed prank in a California grove took a fatal turn. Kinsey Nordman and Damian Guerrero were close friends of 18-year-old Kelly Bullwinkle. Kelly was a community college student in Redlands, California. Kinsey was 21 when she ended Kelly's life. Damian was 18. All three met through the local goth scene. They spent a lot of time together. Kelly had dated Damian briefly in summer 2003. That relationship later became part of what led to her being harmed. On September 13, 2003, Kinsey and Damian lured Kelly into a remote citrus grove in San Timoteo Canyon. The day before, Damian had dug a shallow hole. When Kelly arrived, Damian called her name, then shot at her face. The gun jammed on the first try. He handed it to Kinsey. After she cleared the jam, Kinsey fired a second shot into Kelly's head as she lay dying. They then buried her body beneath an old couch. They later said it was meant as a cruel prank. Kinsey claimed the first shot was an accident. She said she fired the second shot to end Kelly's suffering. Prosecutors disagreed. They said jealousy was the real reason. Kelly had told Damian's girlfriend about their past intimacy. That set off Kinsey's anger. Kelly never returned from her restaurant shift that night. 3 weeks later, some paintball players found her. Tests showed the shell casings matched Damian's gun. During police interviews, both Kinsey and Damian lied. They gave false alibis and even helped with the search. In the end, Kinsey confessed. Her admission gave detectives the full picture. Emails exchanged just days before the fatal event show how tense things were. Kelly wrote, "You treat me as if you're the work of God's hands. You always rub it in my face that you have a boyfriend, and I don't." Kinsey replied, "I'll try to be more considerate. Do you want to hang out Saturday?" Prosecutors said that meeting invite masked their plan. The grove was the setting. The gun was their trigger. In March 2005, both faced trial, each before a different jury. Kinsey was found guilty of first-degree homicide and of firing a weapon. She stood in court with shackled legs. She read a statement. "I know in my heart that there is no excuse for what I did. I never meant for Kelly to be hurt, and I would give anything to bring her back." She received a sentence of 45 years to life. She won't be eligible for parole until roughly 2048. Damian's jury couldn't agree on a verdict. It was 11-1 in favor of guilt. He took a plea deal for second-degree homicide. The judge gave him 15 years to life. In January 2023, a parole board decided he could be released under supervision. He will spend 3 to 5 years on parole after leaving prison. The next story involves a boy who called himself Vampire Boy. Kevin Madden was born in 1987. His half-brother, Jonathan Robert Madden, arrived on May 11, 1991. They grew up in a home filled with tension in Toronto. Their mother, Joanne Champagne, and stepfather, Ralston Champagne, did their best to balance work and family life. Jonathan was easy to like. He smiled a lot and loved music, especially Beethoven. He looked up to his big brother. Kevin, on the other hand, kept to himself. He often skipped school and spent time with his friend Timothy Ferriman. Timothy called himself Vampire Boy because he talked about drinking body fluids. Kevin had trouble with rules. He lashed out at classmates and threatened to harm them. His lawyers later said he struggled with mental health issues after his parents split up and he felt ignored. On November 25, 2003, Kevin, Timothy, and one more friend skipped school. They went back to Kevin's house. They drank wine and smashed things with baseball bats and broken glass. Less than an hour before Jonathan came home, they recorded a phone message to Timothy's girlfriend. In it, they bragged that a big violent act was coming. Jonathan returned planning to visit a cyber cafe. Instead, he walked into danger. The 3 young people forced him down the basement stairs. He could not fight back. Kevin used a sharp tool to slash Jonathan's neck. Then he made more than 70 cuts on his face and upper body. Those wounds cut his voice box and a major artery. Timothy handed Kevin the blade and egged him on. Afterward, they all waited for Ralston to come back. When he did, they tried to hurt him with the bat and blade. Ralston managed to run away and call for help. Later, The three hid Jonathan in a small crawl space under the floor. Police found them and took them in within a day. At trial, the court heard that Kevin resented his brother. He felt forgotten and angry. Experts noted his fixation on dark themes, his lack of empathy, and his tendency toward dramatic thinking. Timothy wanted attention too. He played up the whole thing, held the blade, and recorded their threats. The first trial ended without a verdict. Key testimony fell apart when Timothy's girlfriend admitted she had lied under oath and posted online about dark fantasies. In the retrial, Kevin shocked everyone. He said that people who didn't know Jonathan shouldn't worry about what happened to him. The court found Kevin guilty of first-degree wrongdoing in taking his brother's life and of trying to harm his stepfather. Timothy was held responsible for helping in the act. The third friend was let go. On September 29, 2006, Judge David McCombs gave Kevin life in prison with no chance to leave for 10 years, counting the time he had already spent in custody. Timothy was sent to a youth facility for 2 years, then given 3 years under supervision. Judge McCombs called the act frenzied. He pointed out Kevin's refusal to show any regret and noted that evaluations predicted he might do something like this again. Timothy's clear apology and shame helped him get the lighter sentence. Kevin's lawyer warned that adult prison would keep him from getting the help he needed. Timothy's lawyer said they would appeal. In court, Timothy spoke up and said he was sorry. Kevin only repeated that chilling line. People who did not know Jonathan should not be concerned about what happened to him. Up next is a family friend with a dark past and a deeper influence. Derek King was born in November 1988. His brother Alex arrived in late 1989. They grew up in Cantonment, just outside Pensacola, Florida. Their father, Terry Lee King, was 40 at the time. Their mother, Kelly Marino, did not live with them. Kelly said she felt distant from her boys. Terry was strict. He used spankings and cold stares to keep them in line. Rick Chavis was a close family friend. He was 41 in 2001. Years earlier, he had been found guilty of harming 2 boys. By late 2001, Rick spent a lot of time at the King home. He became unusually close to Alex. Soon after, serious allegations arose. In the early hours of November 26, 2001, Derek and Alex woke their father. They forced him into the living room. Derek grabbed an aluminum baseball bat. He struck Terry's head over and over. Alex stood by. Then the boys poured a flammable liquid around parts of the house. They set it alight. They hoped the blaze would hide what they did. After the fire began, the 2 brothers ran. They went to Rick's trailer nearby. Rick let them in. He washed their clothes, which were red-stained. He kept them hidden overnight. He waited until morning to tell anyone what happened. At first, the boys said they did it themselves. Derek even said, "Alex told me to end my dad's life. I did it with a baseball bat. I started the fire." But a few days later, they changed their story. They said Rick was really behind it. Alex added that Rick had an intimate relationship with him. He claimed Rick told them how to lie. Why did a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old act so cruelly? The boys said they were scared of their father. They feared harsh punishment after running away days before. They felt trapped. Another view said Rick promised them safety and a new life with him. In a note found at the house, Alex wrote that Rick had helped him clarify his goals, and that he felt different about his own feelings. These mixed reasons made the case confusing. First, prosecutors accused Rick of planning the act and persuading the boys to lie. Rick denied this and was cleared of those charges. Then, Derek and Alex stood trial. In September 2002, a jury found them guilty of second-degree ending of life and setting the fire. They were treated as adults. But Judge Frank Bell threw out those verdicts. He said the conflicting trials violated their rights. In November 2002, to avoid more confusion, all parties agreed on a deal. Derek and Alex each pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of third-degree ending of life and arson. Their mother said they were innocent about what jail was like. "They think they're going to a playground," she said. "They really do. They think it will be fun." Derek got an 8-year term. Alex got 7 years. Rick was found guilty of helping after the fact and holding them against their will. He received a 35-year sentence, with parts served at the same time. Derek entered a youth facility. He earned parole after 7 years on March 7, 2009. Alex left after 6 years on April 9, 2008. At 15, Alex tried to escape once from the facility in 2005. Years later, on April 23, 2024, he passed from an overdose in Montana. Now, what made 2 12-year-olds turn on a boy with special needs? Craig Martin Sorger was born on February 10, 1990, in Ephrata, Washington. He was 13 years old and had learning challenges. including ADHD and traits described as slightly autistic. He understood things at about the level of an 8-year-old. Craig lived with his mother, Lisa, and his younger brother in a travel trailer home. People who knew him said he was kind and very trusting. Evan Savoy and Jake Eakin were each 12 when this happened. Neither had any serious trouble with the law before. Evan was outgoing. He was popular, liked to joke, and was seen as the leader of their duo. Jake was quieter. He was smaller in build and did not read well, so he took special education classes. Both boys lived nearby. Their families arranged playdates together. Evan was the one who brought Craig into their circle of friends. On February 15th, 2003, Evan and Jake visited Craig at his trailer. They asked him to play at Oasis Park. Craig's mother said yes. He left around 3 p.m. and walked 1 block to the playground. There, the 3 boys joined each other on the swings and slides. What happened next is chilling. According to Jake's later account, they wandered into a wooded area of the park. Evan told Craig to kneel down and feel the ground for moisture. As Craig counted to 9, Evan lifted a rock nearly as large as a basketball and dropped it on the back of Craig's neck. Craig fell forward. Then Evan began striking Craig with more rocks. Jake joined in, swinging a tree branch at Craig's head and legs more than 20 times until it broke. At one point, Evan took out a small blade and said he wanted to go on a spree of harm. Craig cried out, "Why are you doing this to me?" as he fought to get free. He was struck about 30 times and wounded by the blade at least 34 times in his head and neck. He also had 8 blade wounds in his torso, according to the autopsy. When Craig's body lay motionless in a field near a canal, Evan and Jake tried to wash away his DNA. They dumped or hid their clothes in a pond. Then they walked home. Craig was found hours later by his mother. Investigators were stunned. Why would 2 12-year-olds inflict such harm on a disabled friend? At first, both boys said it was an accident. Craig had fallen from a tree. Their stories kept changing as authorities asked more questions. Evan's mother noticed his shoes were wet and found red-stained clothes at home. The use of rock, branch, and blade showed this was planned. Jake later said he joined in because he was scared of Evan. Still, the brutality and the shifting stories pointed to intent, not confusion. The boys faced the most serious charges and were unusually tried as adults given their ages. Prosecutors argued that the severe nature of the act and Craig's vulnerability required adult-level handling. A forensic psychologist testified that both boys could be treated under juvenile care until age 21, but the court disagreed. Jake pleaded guilty to second-degree involvement in taking a life. He agreed to testify against Evan. Jake described what happened in the woods, which became key to the prosecution's case. Evan was first given a 26-year term, the maximum for first-degree charges. His conviction was overturned in 2011 because his right to a public trial was violated. In 2014, he pleaded guilty to second-degree involvement in taking a life and received a 20-year sentence, the maximum for that charge. Jake was sentenced in 2005 to 14 years after his guilty plea. At his sentencing, he said, "I wanted to tell the truth, that me and Evan harmed Craig." When asked if he thought his sentence was fair, he replied, "No, I deserved it." Evan Savoy, convicted of second-degree involvement in taking a life, 20-year term. Release reported June 2020. Jake Eakin, pleaded guilty to second-degree involvement in taking a life, 14-year term. Release likely around 2019. Up next is a bond between brothers, a trusted friend, and a night that changed everything. Benito Marquez went by Benny. He was 16 and in high school in rural Randall, Washington. His half-brother, Jonathan Adamson, was 21. They lived with their mother, Kendra Rose Adamson, who was 43 and from Lewis County. Benny was close friends with Ben Eastman. His classmates saw him as part of the local circle. The brothers' family had modest means. Kendra was later charged with helping hide what happened after she learned her sons were involved. Beyond that, little is known about their early life. On the night of June 23rd and 24, 2018, Benny invited Ben Eastman on a camping trip in the woods. Ben trusted his friend. He left his father's home in the early hours of June 24th. Once they were alone, the evening turned terrible. Investigators say Jonathan held Ben down. Benny and Jonathan then kicked him again and again for 20 to 45 minutes. They struck Ben's head with their feet so hard that a medical examiner confirmed those blows led to his passing. While he was still alive, they forced a non-consensual act with a stick. After Ben lost consciousness, they used a large rock on his head to be sure he did not wake up. Then they took off everyone's clothes. They burned the clothing and the shovel they had used. Panic set in. They later dug up Ben's body and reburied it in a new spot. They marked the site with a makeshift cross of sticks. Friends and family grew alarmed when Ben didn't return. A search began right away. On June 27th, deputies found his body in a shallow grave on the Marquez Adamson property. A few days later, around June 29th, a routine traffic stop in Ellensburg led to the brothers' arrest. They were brought back to Lewis County. What led to such brutal treatment remains unknown. Court records offer no clear motive. Prosecutors said it was too early to discuss reasons. Some have asked if jealousy or emotional stress played a part. So far, there's no firm answer. On July 2nd, 2018, the state filed charges. The brothers faced first-degree counts for causing a loss of life, forcing an act without consent, tampering with evidence, and mishandling remains. Even though Benny was only 16, he was tried as an adult. At the first hearing, Ben's father, B.J. Eastman, sat in the front row. He looked at the brothers and spoke softly. He said people can do terrible things, and he didn't know what drove them to this. By February 2019, both brothers admitted guilt. Benny Marquez received a 26-year prison term. Jonathan Adamson also pleaded guilty and got a similar sentence. Washington law usually sets such terms between 20 and 30 years. Kendra Adamson later admitted she helped hide what happened. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of rendering assistance. Their girlfriend, 21-year-old Emma Brown, also admitted her role in covering up the incident.